Alright guys, so I've been waiting to do this vid for a while, but this is just going to be kind of my thoughts on the ban list vid. Since I don't have the list in front of me, my internet's being a complete piece of crap right now. I'm just going to kind of go over the list, and because I'm kind of, for the sake of convenience, I'm doing a vid on both this and on both the ban list and thoughts on YCS Toronto, which is obviously coming up this weekend. Basically, with the list, I have mostly positive feelings, but I have some concerns towards the list. One thing that I like about list is I don't like that when they make all decks like completely unplayable. I like the idea of a list keeping decks, with trying to keep decks balanced. For example, it's like I don't like how with Blackwings, as powerful as they've been, and need to be dealt with, I don't like the fact that they've been fairly harsh. Like, from my perspective, when they limited Colute, I thought that was pretty ridiculous, because Blackwings, I didn't see them making a huge impact in the OCG, and Colute itself didn't even seem to be like a huge problem for the deck anyway, so yeah, just seemed rather odd. However, this list, the one thing though about that kind of list though, where it takes care of those, where it like basically kills decks, is at least you know those decks aren't going to be an issue anymore. This list basically takes a different approach, where it makes where none of the decks that are really hit are, except for one deck, are just outright unplayable. That only one deck was basically made unplayable by this list. Every other deck is basically that was playable last format is pretty much kept intact, at least enough so where the deck's is still good and competitive. The deck that obviously now my positive feeling towards this, I like this because now the format's going to be slowed down somewhat. However, the problem with not hitting these decks very well hard is the fact that we're still going to have a pretty aggressive format, which is arguably both good and bad. Good because having a pretty fair format, like you could still control decks are more able to shine, but aggressive decks are fine. I like that, but the problem is that the format might still be fast where there's a fair amount of herb dirt. So that is definitely my concern. However, none of the decks that I see like being popular this coming format are going to be that bad. The only deck that honestly the only two decks that really worry me about that sort of thing. Excuse me. Oh God, I really wish that didn't happen, but whatever. The only two decks are first Dino Rabbit, because they can still go Rabbit, Tour Guide, blah blah blah, and the other one being Windups, because they're now going to be just this toolbox OTK deck. Regardless, it's still, I still have a positive outlook towards the format, because I still look at it where I think one of the biggest problems was the fact that a deck like Inzectors existed, which basically served as a way of punishing you for playing cards. And the fact that once the deck may not have been all that consistent, but once it was able to set up its big plays, it was pretty much guaranteed to win if you didn't have a way of stopping it the first time. So looking at it that way, yeah, that was always a frustration. The other decks function different. The other big decks function differently, so it's not like you're worried about them as much. I mean, for God's sakes, you couldn't stop Inzectors with Deep Prisons, Bottomless Trap Hole, cards like that. So it's like, it's a sigh of relief to know you don't have to worry about those decks with those kinds of play styles. However, what it's coming down to now is a matter of what is going to happen at YCS Toronto, which is which is the second thing I want to talk about. But just going off of the ban list, just briefly talking about it, I really do like the changes that they made, though. Just with how they decided to just they decided to hit the right cards. Dragons, they hit Red Eyes, which was definitely the right thing to do. I don't agree with them hitting Pulsar because I wanted Hieratics to take a big hit too. And they're still playable, but having only one Red Eyes is definitely going to be a problem for them. They're definitely going to be less of an OTK deck than they once were, which is nice. I like the fact that they brought back D-Draw to 3. That was like the change I was really hoping for. They also made plants a bit more playable because they brought Debris back to 2 and they brought Spore back. The problem, however, is that what people are noticing is that now the plant engine is basically a 3-card engine, and the 2 Debris Dragons, which isn't very consistent. I think if plants are going to work, you need to play them in a deck where you can play at least a 4th target, which I personally would recommend as Mystic Tomato, knowing you're at the very least going to have your Sanguine as a target. And worst case scenario, if you've already used Tour Guide, you can get that Tour Guide back from your deck if you're really desperate. So now you don't have a dead draw. Aside from that, it's like the list just kind of just works out to, just be, just kind of be this equalizer to this somewhat of an equalizer to the format. I'm also very glad they hit the Gishki card that does the hand loop. The hand loop does technically exist still because I realized you only need 1. But it's okay because now that loop is going to be a lot less consistent, which is perfectly fine. Even if you can search for the ritual monster, having the combo ready is going to still be harder. Overall, I would say that that's kind of where the rest of the discussion gets to. I really am wondering what's going to be like top tier for next format. Like I said, the only 2 decks that I'm certain of are going to make an impact on the format are going to be like top tier, 3 decks right now. First is Windups. Windups, people are talking about it. It's pretty obvious. They are probably going to be one of the best decks, unfortunately. Not being able to hand loop on one hand is, is obviously a problem, but the deck was able to win without the loop. The thing is now they still have access to a lot of their toolbox plays. They can still make their rank 5 Xyz monsters. They can still make their rank 3s. They can still OTK you, which is what you have to be very wary about. And this leads me to wonder how this kind of puts this kind of what makes me worry we're going to be in the same conundrum we were in last year, last format, which is I've talked about as being a format where I didn't like the idea of running. Agents got more popular. Agents are also now alive, but I didn't like the idea of running a deck that didn't run any back rows. I felt like back rows were all too pertinent last format because of decks like Windups and because of decks like Insectors. You needed the back rows to deal with your opponent's plays because more than likely they could herp derp you more than you could herp derp them. So yeah, kind of made sense. Oh, sorry guys, I wish I wasn't yawning like crazy, but whatever. But with this, like, Windups are going to be good. They're going to be big. Dino Rabbit, people are going to still play that deck. It's like Lagius at 5 back row. Okay. The deck's less consistent, but it's still fully capable of the same plays. At least I like, though, if you stop one of their tour guides with something other, if you're able to stop their tour guide play after they've already got the second tour guide or Sanguine out, they can't do anything else after that. So, yeah. Hitting tour guide to 2 is also something I like. I wish they put it to 1, but at least if they put it to 2, it kind of does more to decks than people think. Tour guide at 2 can be kind of messy sometimes. Deciding whether to run a second target aside from Sanguine is, difficult because you have to consider some of the risks. It makes for some interesting card choices in your deck. So, there are some very tough decisions. Regardless, then you have Chaos Dragons because they're still very viable. They're just not going to be as powerful. The thing is, I think the Chaos Dragon player will have to play something like Forbidden Lance in the deck because this way it'll guarantee you're able to protect that one Red Eyes that you have. If your opponent has something like Ban-List or Deep Prison, you're going to really want to have an out to that, or just a way of stopping it. But in terms of like my top 5 choices, I would say I have Windups at second, Dino Rabbit 3rd, Chaos Dragons 4th, Heroes 5th, even though I really am rooting for Heroes because I love the deck, and I might run a Hero deck at my regionals next week, which I'll talk about over the course of the next week. Aside from that, my big choice, I'm just going to say it, Rogue deck. Any Rogue deck that one would consider to be not a meta deck right now. There's a bunch of decks I can think of off the top of my head that I would argue are Rogue decks, but regardless, I just feel like it's going to be a deck that's innovative, that's different. I feel like because of the fact that this YCS is taking place on the very first day of the format, people are going to be able to take advantage of that by bringing in decks that people aren't going to necessarily be ready to side against. How do you deal with that? Well, generally in this kind of YCS, people are going to probably side in generic side deck hate, aside from cards that they know are going to be useful, aside from cards that are going to be side specifically for decks that they know they're likely going to face. So that's basically the way of looking at it. That's essentially how I'm looking at it. Hopefully, there's just a lot of hope with this YCS. I'm hoping that we do see a fair amount of diversity in the decks, but only time will actually tell with that. Is there anything else I really want to mention? Not really. There are a few decks I've been testing that I probably will show you. I've been testing the new Tefnut Dad deck that's been making waves around around forums and around YouTube. It's an interesting deck. It's just like I said, I think I'm very just against running it right now until I'm convinced that you can really get away with running a trapless deck in this kind of format. The deck doesn't have to be trapless per se, but I think the best builds are going to run like 1 or 2 traps at most. So take that into consideration. Aside from that, I'm going away for this weekend. I was obviously away in Europe before for the past 2 weekends. This weekend I'm just going to be away with my family. We're going out to the beach. We're going to Ocean City, Maryland, spend some time with some friends. Going to be back Monday. Might make a video then. We'll see what happens. Other than that, enjoy yourselves, guys, and have a good weekend.